The silence within the obsidian sanctum was not the absence of sound, but the heavy, suffocating pressure of absolute authority, a silence so dense it felt as though it could crush the lungs of any lesser being foolish enough to draw breath without permission. High Strategist Vrenthal stood rigid, his four-fingered hands clasped behind the ceremonial plating of his dorsal ridge, staring out through the monolithic viewing port that comprised the entire eastern wall of the spire. Below him, the capital city of the Zalarian hegemony burned with the cold, electric blue light of unceasing industry, a sprawling testament to 10,000 cycles of conquest, expansion, and the ruthless subjugation of the weak. But Vrenthal was not looking at the city, nor was he admiring the vast orbital rings that encircled the planet like halos of iron and light. His golden, slit-pupiled eyes were fixed on the holographic projection hovering in the center of the chamber, a shimmering sphere of data that represented the current state of the galactic arm. It was a map of dominance, a cartography of inevitability, showing the encroaching violet tide of the hegemony swallowing the pathetic, scattered clusters of yellow that represented the Terran Federation. To any observer, to any loyal subject of the hegemony, the map told a story of absolute victory, a narrative of a superior species asserting its natural right to rule over a disorganized, fragile newcomer. The Terran lines were collapsing. Their fleets, described in the initial intelligence reports as primitive amalgamations of kinetic weaponry and unrefined fusion drives, were retreating to the very edge of the Perseus transit, a dead zone of radiation and stellar dust where no civilization could hope to sustain itself. The Empire had won. The celebration had already begun in the lower districts, the chants of Apex, Apex, rising like steam from the crowded plazas. Yet within the cold, calculating mind of High Strategist Vrenthal, a singular, jagged shard of doubt refused to be smoothed away by the comforting propaganda of the state. He watched the red pulse of the Terran retreat, noting the vector, the speed, and the cohesion of their formation. A rooted army does not move in geometric unison. A species fleeing for its survival, terrified and broken by the superior might of Zalarian plasma lances and gravity tethers, does not maintain a communications silence so perfect it mimics the void itself. There was a discipline to their despair that Vrenthal found deeply, viscerally unsettling, a rhythmic precision to their collapse that smelled less like fear and more like a trap, though he could not voice this suspicion without risking the accusation of cowardice. The Grand Archon, seated upon the throne of severed stars at the head of the room, would hear no talk of caution, for caution was the language of the prey, and the Zalarians were the predators of the galaxy. The Archon's carapace was polished to a mirror sheen, inlaid with the crushed gemstones of conquered worlds, and his voice, when it finally broke the oppressive silence, was a low rumble that vibrated through the floor plates, resonating in the chest cavities of the assembled High Council. "The humans have been corralled," the Grand Archon declared, his hand sweeping through the hologram, scattering the yellow dots of the Terran fleet like dust motes in a storm. "They retreat to the graveyard sector. They seek to hide amidst the interference of the pulsars, hoping our targeting sensors will fail, hoping we will tire of the chase. They do not understand that the hegemony does not tire. We do not sleep. We do not forget. High Strategist, prepare the final armada. We shall jump to the edge of the Perseus transit and extinguish their final spark. I want their homeworld coordinates extracted from the wreckage of their flagship. I want their history erased before the next cycle begins." Vrenthal turned slowly, the servos in his armor whining at a subaudible frequency, a sound only his species could detect. He looked at the other council members, the Minister of War, whose mandibles twitched with anticipation, the Keeper of the Faith, who saw this war as a divine mandate, and the various fleet admirals who were already mentally spending the glory they would accrue from this slaughter. They were drunk on the ease of it all. The war had lasted only 3 standard months. In that time, humanity had lost colony after colony, outpost after outpost, offering only token resistance, firing mass-driver rounds that shattered harmlessly against Zalarian void shields, and broadcasting pleas for ceasefire that the hegemony had broadcasted publicly as entertainment for the masses. It was too easy. The history of the Zalarians was written in blood and struggle. Every species they had conquered had fought with the ferocity of the damned, tearing at the hegemony's throat until the bitter end. But the humans, they had folded. They had backed away. They had apologized for the misunderstanding of their existence. It was pathetic. It was insulting. And Vrenthal feared it was a fabrication. "My Archon," Vrenthal said, his voice measured, stripping away any emotional inflection to present only cold logic. The order for the final armada is ready. However, I must place a formal query into the record. The tactical analysis of the Terran withdrawal shows anomalies. Their energy signatures during the engagement at Sector 4 did not match the output of their engines. They were running at 30% capacity. When our dreadnoughts engaged their heavy cruisers, the human ships vented atmosphere and drifted, but our scans indicated their cores were still active. They simulated death. They simulated incompetence. I submit that we are not driving them into a corner. I submit that they are leading us to a location of their choosing. The graveyard sector is dense with hyperspatial static. It is the one place in the quadrant where our long-range Ansible network is unreliable. If I were to design a kill box for a superior force, I would choose the Perseus Transit. The Minister of War, a hulking brute of a Zalarian named Crox, slammed his fist onto the obsidian table, the impact sending a spiderweb of cracks through the holographic projection. "Cowardice masked as strategy," Crox roared, his saliva acidic and sizzling on the polished floor. "You overthink the mind of a soft-flesh species, Vrenthal. You look for demons where there are only frightened animals. We scanned their vessels. Their technology is crude, combustion, fission, basic magnetic acceleration. They do not have the capacity for a trap that could threaten the hegemony. They are running because they are weak. They are hiding because they are afraid. Do not insult the glory of this victory with your paranoid delusions." The Grand Archon leaned forward, his multiple eyes narrowing, focusing on Vrenthal with a predatory intensity. "The strategist is cautious," the Archon said, his tone dripping with condescension. "That is why we keep him, but caution has its limits. If you believe there is a trap, Vrenthal, then you shall lead the vanguard. You will take your personal fleet, the Sovereign's will, and you will enter the transit first. If the humans have some primitive surprise waiting, you shall trigger it, and the main armada will crush them while they are distracted. But I suspect you will find nothing but drifting hulks and weeping diplomats. Do not fail me. Do not let your fear stain the honor of the throne." Dismissal was final. Vrenthal bowed, the gesture stiff and formal, hiding the seething frustration that roiled within his gut. He knew with the instinct of a commander who had survived 100 campaigns that they were walking into the maw of something ancient and terrible. As he turned to leave the sanctum, the heavy blast doors grinding open to reveal the corridor beyond, he glanced back one last time at the hologram. The yellow dots of the humans had stopped moving. They had reached the edge of the transit. They were waiting. The journey to the Perseus Transit was a blur of frenetic activity and mounting dread for Vrenthal. While the rest of the fleet crews rejoiced, painting kill markers on their hulls before the shots were even fired, Vrenthal paced the bridge of his flagship, the Silence of Stars. He reviewed every sensor log, every intercepted transmission, every scrap of data the hegemony had collected on humanity. The data was consistent, almost too consistent. Humans were bipedal, carbon-based, relatively short-lived, emotional, and fractured into competing nation-states before their unification. They possessed art, music, philosophy, traits the Zalarians viewed as symptoms of a lack of focus. A species that spent time debating the meaning of existence was a species that had not yet realized the only meaning was power. But there were gaps in the intelligence. The humans had expanded rapidly, terraforming worlds that should have been uninhabitable. They had engines that, according to Zalarian physics, should not be efficient enough to move their massive colony ships, yet they moved. And there was the matter of the diplomatic corps. The humans had sent envoys not to negotiate terms of surrender, but to explain the parameters of coexistence. The hegemony had executed the first 3 envoys. The humans had simply sent a fourth with a message that read, "We understand your culture requires displays of dominance. We accept your need to posture, but please do not mistake our patience for inability." "High strategist," the voice of his comms officer broke his reverie. "We are approaching the transit coordinates. The main armada is forming up behind us. The Archon is monitoring from the dreadnought Apex Prime. He demands we initiate the engagement." Vrenthal looked at the main view screen. The Perseus Transit was a swirling nebula of bruised Plez and deep blacks, a graveyard of stars where gravity twisted and churned. Floating in the distance, barely visible against the cosmic backdrop, was the Terran fleet. It looked pitiful, a collection of boxy, utilitarian shapes, lacking the sleek, predatory curves of Zalarian engineering. They were arranged in a defensive sphere, their engines glowing with a faint, amber light. They looked like a flock of birds huddled against a coming hurricane. "Scan them," Vrenthal ordered. "Deep spectrum. I want to know what they are hiding in their cargo holds. I want to know why their shields are down." "Shields are down," the tactical officer repeated, confusion coloring his voice. Sir, readings confirm. The Terran vessels have lowered their particle barriers. They are completely exposed. They are hailing us. Put it on screen, Vrenthal said, his grip tightening on the railing of the command dais. The screen flickered, the static of the nebula interfering for a moment before the image resolved. It was not a soldier who appeared, nor a trembling leader begging for mercy. It was a human female older, with silver hair pulled back into a severe knot. She wore a simple gray tunic, unadorned by medals or armor. Her eyes were dark, and in them Vrenthal saw an abyss of calm that chilled his blood. She sat at a wooden desk, a physical object that seemed absurdly archaic aboard a starship, and her hands were folded gently atop a sheaf of paper. "This is Ambassador Elena Vance of the Terran Federation," the human spoke, her voice translated by the ship's computer into the guttural clicks and hisses of the Zalarian tongue, yet retaining a melodic, terrifying softness. "I am addressing the commander of the fleet currently targeting us. We see you have brought your entire military might. The Grand Archon is present, I presume." Vrenthal stepped into the pickup field. "I am High Strategist Vrenthal. You stand accused of existing within the rightful territory of the Zalarian hegemony. Your fleets are broken. Your worlds are forfeit. Surrender your command codes and prepare for assimilation. Resistance will result in the total sterilization of your species." The human woman Vance did not flinch. She did not look angry. She looked disappointed. She sighed, a small, human sound that conveyed a weariness of the soul. "High Strategist," she said softly. "We have spent the last 3 months attempting to communicate with you. We have absorbed your fire. We have allowed you to destroy our automated mining outposts. We have retreated from 3 sectors to bring you here, away from the populated worlds, away from the innocence of your own empire. We did this because we have strict laws regarding the engagement of younger civilizations. We hoped, against all probability, that you would stop, that you would see we were not firing back and ask why." "Because you cannot," Vrenthal snapped, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "You are weak." "We are not weak, Vrenthal," Vance said, and for the first time her voice carried a steel edge, a resonance of absolute certainty. We are careful because we know what happens when we are not. You see our ships and you see targets. You count our hulls and you do the math of conquest. But you have made a fundamental error. You assumed that what you saw was the entirety of us. You assumed that because we came in peace, we did not bring the capacity for war." "Enough of this prattle," the voice of the Grand Archon cut through the comms channel, overriding Vrenthal's console. "They are stalling. Fire, all batteries fire, burn them from the sky." The order was absolute. The Zalarian armada, thousands of sleek warships, lit up the void. Beams of coherent plasma, antimatter torpedoes, and gravity-shear cannons erupted in a blinding display of violence. The energy output was enough to crack a planet's crust. It surged toward the huddled Terran fleet, a tsunami of destruction that should have vaporized them instantly. Vrenthal watched, unable to look away, waiting for the explosion, waiting for the end. But the end did not come. At the precise moment the barrage should have struck the Terran ships, the space around them folded. It didn't shimmer like a shield. It didn't absorb the energy. The space itself simply ceased to be there. The plasma beams curved, wrapping around the Terran formation as if sliding off a sphere of perfect frictionless glass, and dissipated harmlessly into the nebula behind them. The torpedoes vanished, swallowed by pinpoint singularities that opened and closed in nanoseconds. The gravity shears rebounded, sending shockwaves back toward the Zalarian fleet, rocking the massive dreadnoughts. "Report," Vrenthal shouted over the sudden cacophony of alarms. "What happened? Did their shields reflect it?" "No shields detected," the sensor officer screamed, his voice rising an octave in panic. "Sir, the readings, the local laws of physics, are being rewritten. The gravitational constant around the human fleet has shifted. Space-time is bending, and, sir, new contacts, massive contacts, they aren't coming from hyperspace. They're decloaking from the layer between dimensions." On the screen, Ambassador Vance was still sitting at her desk. She hadn't moved. She looked up, her eyes locking with Vrenthal S across the vacuum. "We hold the door shut, High Strategist. We keep the monsters out, but you insisted on breaking the lock." She reached forward and pressed a single key on her desk. "Protocol Omega is authorized. Reveal the Guardians." It started as a vibration in the hull plates of every Zalarian ship. Then the light from the nebula was blotted out, not by a cloud but by a shadow. Above the Terran fleet, below the Zalarian armada, and surrounding them on all sides, the void began to tear open. These were not warp gates. This was reality being peeled back like wet parchment. From the tiers emerged the hidden fleet. They were not ships in any sense the Zalarians understood. They were megastructures, vast monolithic shapes of matte black alloy that absorbed all light, visible only by the way they occluded the stars. Some were the size of moons, geometric polyhedrons that hummed with energy that tasted like ozone on the tongue. Others were sleek needle-like lances thousands of miles long. There were no engines visible, no weapon ports, just smooth, unbroken surfaces that radiated a sense of ancient, dormant power. The Zalarian sensors screamed and died, overwhelmed by the sheer mass of the arrivals. The computer tried to count them and failed, returning only error codes. It was not a fleet, it was a horizon of steel. Vrenthal stood paralyzed. The scale was impossible. A civilization capable of building one of these vessels would be a Type II civilization, masters of their star. But there were thousands of them. They dwarfed the Grand Archon's flagship like a leviathan dwarfs a minnow. "This is impossible," the Minister of War whispered over the fleet channel, his bravado shattered into dust. "They are primitives, they burn dirt for fuel. This is Elder Tech, this is God Tech." Ambassador Vance's voice returned, amplified now, broadcasting on every frequency, overriding every Zalarian system. Her face appeared on every screen in the fleet, on the personal datapads of the soldiers, even on the public view screens back on the Zalarian homeworld. "You call us primitives," Vance said, her voice echoing with the weight of the massive ships surrounding them. "And in many ways we still argue, we still grieve, we still struggle to be better. But you misunderstood our history. You thought we were fractured because we were weak. We were fractured because we were terrified of what we could do to one another. We built this fleet not to conquer the galaxy, but to ensure that war would never again be the only option. We hid it in the folds of subspace, anchored to the gravity of our home star, waiting for a day we hoped would never come. We call them the Peacekeepers, but our enemies have called them the End of Days." The Grand Archon, panic finally piercing his arrogance, screamed into the comms. "Fire! Fire everything! They are big targets! Destroy them!" The Zalarian fleet obeyed, driven by discipline and fear. Thousands of weapons fired upon the nearest black monolith. The energy struck the hull and simply ceased to exist. The black surface rippled like water, absorbing the energy, feeding on it. Then the monolith answered. It did not fire a beam. It did not launch a missile. It emitted a pulse. A single, low-frequency wave of distortion that swept through the Zalarian armada. On the bridge of the Silence of Stars, Vrenthal felt the ship lurch. Then silence, absolute terrifying silence. The engines died. The reactor output dropped to zero. The artificial gravity failed, leaving the crew floating in the air. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the dim red glow of emergency chemical lights. Every weapon system was offline. Every computer core was frozen. The pulse had not destroyed them, it had simply turned them off. It had reached into the intricate, high-tech heart of the Zalarian war machine and stopped it from beating. Drifting in the zero gravity of his bridge, Vrenthal looked out the viewport. The entire Zalarian armada, the pride of 10,000 years of conquest, was dead in space, a graveyard of drifting metal. The voice of Ambassador Vance came through the emergency comms, which were somehow still functioning. Powered, Vrenthal realized with horror, by the energy beam the humans were projecting directly into their receivers. "We have dampened your reactors using a localized stasis field," Vance explained, her tone clinical now. "Your life support will remain active. Your weapons will not. We have no desire to kill you, Archon. Killing is a failure of imagination, but we will not allow you to Kai." "LLS." A shuttle detached from the massive black monolith nearest to Vrenthal's ship. It was small, sleek, and moved with a grace that mocked the Zalarian paralysis. It headed straight for the Grand Archon's dreadnought. "We are boarding the flagship," Vance continued. "We are removing the Grand Archon from command. He will be placed in a comfortable confinement where he can no longer hurt anyone. The Zalarian hegemony is hereby under the temporary stewardship of the Terran Federation until such time as you can prove you are capable of existing in a galactic community without trying to eat it. High Strategist Vrenthal." Vrenthal flinched as his name was spoken. He pulled himself toward the comms panel, pressing the manual transmit button. I am here." "My tactical analysts tell me you were the only one who hesitated," Vance said. "The only one who saw the trap, the only one who advised caution. That indicates a capacity for reason. I am inviting you to board my vessel. We have much to discuss regarding the restructuring of your government and the dismantling of your military-industrial complex. Do not refuse." It was not a request. Vrenthal looked at his crew terrified, floating, helpless. He looked at the vast, impossible fleet that had appeared from nowhere. He realized then that the war had been over before it began. The humans hadn't been fighting, they had been evaluating. "I accept," Vrenthal said, his voice trembling. Hours later, Vrenthal sat in a room that felt more like a library than a holding cell. It was aboard one of the massive peacekeeper vessels. The walls were lined with physical books, and the air smelled of old paper and tea. Ambassador Vance sat opposite him, pouring a steaming liquid into 2 ceramic cups. The scale of the ship was mind-bending. Vrenthal had seen internal scans on his way here. The ship was hollowed out, containing entire biomes, factories, and cities. It was a world ship. "Why?" Vrenthal asked, holding the cup with shaking hands. "If you have this power, why did you let us burn your colonies? Why did you let us kill your people? You could have stopped us in the first hour. You could have ruled the galaxy." Vance took a sip of her tea, her expression sorrowful. "We let you advance because we needed to be sure. We needed to know if you were irredeemable. If we had crushed you immediately, you would have learned nothing but fear. You would have regrouped, built better weapons, and tried again. We needed you to feel the victory, to show your true colors, and then to see that victory snatched away not by violence, but by a higher order of physics. We needed to break your ideology, not just your ships." "But the cost," Vrenthal whispered. "The cost was calculated," Vance said. "The colonies you destroyed were evacuated days before you arrived. The resistance you fought was automated. The people you killed were bioandroids and remote drones. We haven't lost a single human life in this conflict, High Strategist. We stopped fighting wars with bodies centuries ago. We fight with logistics and psychology now." Vrenthal stared at her, his mind reeling. The humiliation was total. They hadn't even been fighting real humans. They had been fighting the human equivalent of toys. "But there is another reason," Vance said, her voice dropping, becoming serious and grave. She placed the cup down and tapped the table. The walls of the room shifted, becoming transparent, revealing the view of the galaxy outside. But the view zoomed out past the nebula, past the spiral arm, staring into the deep, dark void between galaxies. "We did not build the hidden fleet for you, Vrenthal," Vance said softly. "The Zalarian hegemony is, forgive me, a nuisance, a regional dispute. We built this fleet because of what is out there." She pointed into the darkness. Vrenthal squinted. At first he saw nothing. Then he saw it. A shadow. A patch of the universe where there were no stars, no light, no radiation. And the shadow was growing. It was moving toward their galaxy. "We call it the entropic tide," Vance said. "It is a swarm, not of ships, but of biological consumers that eat stars. They stripped the Andromeda galaxy of life 3 million years ago. They are coming here. They will be here in less than a century." Vrenthal felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. The petty wars of the hegemony, the desire for territory, the glory of the kill, it all felt instantly, laughably insignificant. "We hid our fleet because we did not want to alert the tide," Vance continued. "We operate in silence. We build in the dark. We have been preparing for the real war for 500 years. We revealed ourselves today because we cannot afford to have the hegemony nipping at our heels while we prepare the wall. We need your resources, Vrenthal. We need your industrial capacity. We need your soldiers, but we need them fighting the real Een." "My—" Vance leaned forward, her eyes burning with a fierce, terrifying resolve. "The Empire thought it won today, but today is the day the Empire dies and the Alliance begins. Because if we do not stand together, if we do not merge your aggression with our technology, the lights of this galaxy will go out, and they will never be lit again." Vrenthal looked at the woman, this primitive, who commanded the power of gods, who looked into the face of galactic extinction with a calm, steely gaze. He realized then that the Zalarians were children playing with sticks, and the humans were the adults who had finally stepped in to stop the game because the storm was coming. He stood up, the joints of his armor clicking in the quiet room. He placed his fist against his chest, a gesture of absolute loyalty he had once reserved only for the Archon. "What do you need me to do, Ambassador?" Vrenthal asked. "Sit down, High Strategist," Vance said, opening a large, complex holographic schematic of the galaxy. "We have a lot of work to do, and we are running out of time." The camera pulled back from the room, through the hull of the massive world ship, past the drifting, powered-down hulks of the Zalarian fleet, and out into the vast, indifferent silence of the cosmos. In the distance, the black shadow of the entropic tide loomed, a hungering mouth against the fabric of creation. But now, between the shadow and the light, stood the hidden fleet, a line of silver and steel, a shield raised by the calmest, most dangerous species in the universe. The humans had stopped hiding. And the galaxy would never be the same.